So, what is the real key when it comes to carrying out a successful cutting phase and losing fat consistently from week to week? Well, we know first and foremost that What's up guys, Sean Nalawani, RealScienceAthletics.com, and in today's video we're talking about the real key when it comes to achieving permanent, long-lasting fat loss success. And this has nothing to do with some BS quick fix or fad diet solution like you'll find on so many other channels. Okay, this is straight ahead, legitimate advice for those who are serious about transforming their bodies the right way. Before I jump into the video, if you're new to the channel and you find these tips helpful, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below to stay updated on future videos, and also make sure to follow me over on Instagram as well, where I post daily muscle building and fat loss tips, photos, videos, personal updates, and more that you'll definitely find useful. It's at Sean_Nalawani. That's where you'll find me when I'm not here on YouTube. So, what is the real key when it comes to carrying out a successful cutting phase and losing fat consistently from week to week? Well, we know first and foremost that you need to create a calorie deficit, right? There's no debate about that among anyone who knows what they're talking about. You need to consistently burn more energy than you take in. That's the absolute most foundational principle there is. You know, it goes beyond the specific foods you eat, your macronutrient split, meal timing, training program. If you want to burn off body fat, there has to be an energy deficit in place because that's what stimulates your body to release stored fat for use as fuel. And that's all well and good, but there's also another very important principle that goes hand in hand with your calorie deficit that a lot of times gets overlooked, both by the coaches who give out training and nutrition advice and by the people who are actually trying to achieve success with their fat loss goals. The big mistake is that so many people out there are way too hung up on trying to figure out what specific diet will produce the fastest rate of progress. You know, what combination of foods and macros and meal timing and meal spacing, you know, what combination of those things will get them to their goal as quickly as possible, that they totally overlook the factor of sustainability. What people forget or what they don't understand in the first place is that sustainability is also an absolutely primary factor in the fat burning process. Okay, it doesn't matter how effective a given dieting strategy is at actually creating a calorie deficit. If it's not a style of eating that you can personally maintain over the long term, then it's ultimately going to be useless for you when it all comes down to it, and it's only going to be a matter of time before you eventually burn out and quit. So effectiveness and sustainability go hand in hand, and they both have to be taken into account if you're serious about achieving your goals. If your diet is sustainable, but it doesn't put you in a calorie deficit, then that's of course not going to be successful. And on the other hand, if your diet does put you in a calorie deficit, but it's not sustainable, then that's of course not going to work out either. So the real key to fat loss success, as unsexy as it might sound and as simple as it might sound on the surface, is to set up your diet in a way that creates a calorie deficit in the most sustainable way possible for you. And I say for you because this is something that's going to vary from person to person, which is another fact that often gets overlooked. You know, there are so many fitness experts out there who just stand firmly behind one single method of dieting and just promote it as the holy grail for everyone, whether it's intermittent fasting or keto or vegan or low carb or whatever else. And that might be good for marketing purposes if you want to hype something up and sell more programs, but it's not how things actually work in the real world. As long as you're in a net calorie deficit, there's really no convincing evidence that any one of these specific diets is actually going to lead to greater net fat loss over the long term when total calories are equated. And even if one diet does happen to be superior to another, the difference is likely going to be marginal overall, and it's not going to be a strong enough reason to completely ditch another style of eating that you more prefer just for the sake of a small increase in your rate of fat loss. Unless you have some hard deadline in place where you must lose X amount of fat in Y time frame, then whether it takes you precisely 10 weeks or 14 weeks or 18 weeks to get to your goal, that's really not going to matter in the big picture. What matters by far the most is that you just get to your goal, period. And so the best fat loss diet for you really does primarily come down to the issue of sustainability. Okay, selecting an approach that you can adhere to and stay consistent with, and what is sustainable for one person might not be sustainable for another because there is variation across the population in terms of food and macronutrient preferences, meal timing preferences, lifestyle, goals, and also how each person prefers to go about things, whether they want to create a smaller calorie deficit and lose fat a bit more gradually over a longer period, or create a larger calorie deficit that might be a bit more uncomfortable to stick to, but that they only have to maintain for a shorter time to reach their goal. So if you're still new to the whole fat loss thing, or you've tried to lose fat in the past but failed, This is something that you'll want to experiment with a bit, and you have to be willing to put in some time and effort in order to find the approach that you personally find to be the most enjoyable and the one that you can stick to as easily as possible. The more enjoyable you can make the process, the more you can set things up so that your hunger levels are minimized, the more seamlessly your eating plan fits into your lifestyle, the greater your chances for long-term success will be. So maybe that means intermittent fasting. Maybe not eating anything for the first 6 to 8 hours of the day and pushing your calories toward the later afternoon and evening. Maybe that simplifies things for you and makes it easier to adhere to your deficit. There's a lot of people out there who use intermittent fasting successfully, or it might not be that. It might not fit your preferences and lifestyle, and maybe you just feel better eating a regular breakfast meal, and so intermittent fasting is not for you. Maybe a ketogenic diet works for you. It's not the type of diet that I would go out of my way to recommend because for a lot of people out there, it just isn't practical and it's a bit too extreme for most people. But there clearly is a subset of people who use keto and swear by it and got great results with it and will argue to the death about how effective it is. So maybe if you've tried other approaches and you had a hard time with them, maybe a ketogenic diet or something similar could be worth experimenting with. Or maybe you have no need for intermittent fasting or keto or anything along those lines, and just a basic balanced approach with regularly spaced meals and a more even macronutrient distribution. Maybe that's where you feel best and you just want to create a calorie deficit that way. And even with the more balanced approach, which is probably what will be most realistic for the majority of the population, even within that, there are still different variables that you can experiment with to see what you feel best on. For example, some people might prefer 5 smaller meals per day, whereas others might prefer 3 medium-sized meals and 1 snack, or 2 large meals and 2 snacks. Or maybe you feel best by eating a bit lighter during the earlier portion of the day and then allocating more of your calories toward the later hours, or vice versa. Maybe you prefer eating a bit higher protein, let's say 1.2 grams per pound of body weight, and eating a bit less carbs and a bit less fat, versus going lower protein, maybe 0.8 grams per pound of body weight, and consuming a higher amount of carbs and fat. There's no one magical macronutrient ratio, and as long as an overall calorie deficit is in place, then interchanging your protein, carbs, and fat a bit is not going to be a big deal when it all comes down to it. When it comes to incorporating treat foods into the mix, maybe you're someone who enjoys just having a smaller treat every single day and fitting that into your total calorie intake, or maybe you're someone who finds it hard to stop at one treat because it acts like a trigger food, which then makes you crave even more. And so in that case, maybe you just focus on eating clean the majority of the time, but then have a more traditional cheat meal, every few days or even once a week. So these are all different variables that you can play around with to see what feels the best for you physically and what is most convenient. And as long as total calories for the day as a whole are equated and you're in a calorie deficit, your bottom line fat loss results are not really going to differ either way. It really ultimately does just come down to calories in versus calories out for the day and for the week as a whole. I understand that a lot of people out there want black and white answers, and they just want to be told what the absolute one single best diet is, the set in stone strategy that will produce optimal results 100% of the time without fail. But the plain fact is that individual variation is a thing, and in order to create a calorie deficit that is as sustainable as possible for you, you're going to need to gain a bit of experience and learn about yourself and your body to find what is most sustainable for you as an individual. The only universal guidelines that I would give that should be applied no matter what type of diet you're on are that number one, you need to be consuming sufficient protein each day for muscle recovery and growth. And I'd say 0.8 grams per pound of body weight is a safe minimum. If you're more on the overweight side, then 0.7 grams is probably enough. And you want to spread that protein out over at least 2 individual feedings for the day, and ideally 3 or more. Although the benefit of going beyond 2 will probably be pretty marginal overall. Secondly, you should be basing the bulk of your diet, at least 80 to 90%, around minimally processed, nutrient-dense whole foods. And you want to do that for the sake of overall health, and because in virtually all cases, that's going to make your diet a lot easier to stick to, because clean foods tend to be lower in calories relative to their volume. And then thirdly, is that you just want to make sure you're getting in enough fat to keep testosterone levels in check. And I would say 25% of total calories from fat, that's a good minimum figure to aim for per day. But as long as you're doing those basic things and you're in a calorie deficit of about 500 calories below maintenance, give or take, everything else that you do with your diet in terms of food choices, macronutrient breakdown, meal timing, treat food incorporation, etc., all of that should be configured in whatever way allows you as an individual to stick to your calorie deficit in the most effortless way possible. And yes, it will take a bit of work on your part to figure out what set of variables is best suited for you. Losing fat And keeping fat off is not some sort of 12-week program or quick fix. Okay, this involves an overall lifestyle change that you'll be maintaining for many years to come. And if you're not willing to put in that initial effort up front, then quite honestly, this just isn't something you're truly serious about, and it's only going to be a matter of time before you likely give up anyway. There's a reason why such a high percentage of people who embark on a fat loss program ultimately fail in the long run, and that's because they just dive headfirst into some random hyped up program they found online. They get excited at first and maybe they stick to it for a few weeks, but inevitably they find that it just isn't sustainable and they eventually give up and quit. Instead, what you want to do is start off with one program that has a good set of fundamentals in place, like I mentioned before. Okay, calorie deficit, sufficient protein, based around nutrient-dense whole foods, sufficient fat. See how it goes, pay attention to your hunger levels and what aspects of that plan are working well for you and which ones aren't, and then gradually tweak things to your own preference to find the overall dietary structure that allows you to hit your daily calorie needs for fat loss in the way that you enjoy most, in the way that requires the least effort and the least willpower, and that you can realistically stick to over the long term. If you found this information helpful and you want to get what I consider to be the very best initial program in place, not just in terms of nutrition, but also weight training, cardio, and supplementation, so that you can maximize your rate of fat loss and muscle growth in a practical and sustainable way, then make sure to take my physique quiz over at quiz.seannell.com, because that'll hook you up with everything you need in an easy to follow step-by-step format based on your individual body type, goals, and experience level. You can click up here for that or use the link in the description box below. On the supplementation side of things, you can also visit RealScienceAthletics.com to check out my science-based, no BS supplements that I personally formulated to help fully streamline your program and optimize your overall rate of progress. And you can use coupon code YouTube15 to save 15% off your entire first order. And as always, guys, make sure to hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe below if you haven't already in order to stay up to date on future videos. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one.